All right. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. We'll give all our folks a couple of minutes to get logged in here, then we'll get rolling. All right, guys. So before we get going, you guys have a good holiday?
Yeah, pretty good, man. Some rest and relaxation.
Good.
Yeah, for the most part. I think I don't know. It's a busy holiday sometimes, it's always a busy
Sure.
time of the year for work and stuff. But as far as got to see some family, got to hang out a little bit, but at the same time, kind of just stay inside and try to avoid this new push of COVID. And
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was like mid 60s here the whole time. I think probably for you too, Minx, and I just kind of hung out outside a whole lot. It was really nice to Christmas Eve in shorts. So
yeah, I got a lot of outside time in, a lot of fishing, which was good. It wasn't great. The water wasn't great, but it was great to be fishing. And got that new Blackstone grill, and oh my God, I've been cooking so much, man. So much.
Yeah, it's been a little too cold. I haven't been using mine as much. I'd love to be out there cooking a little bit more, but been cooking inside a lot. I did buy a bunch of new pots, pans, like a new skillet and stuff like that, all kinds of different things for inside at least. So been using that up a lot. It's been good.
So I've gotten so hooked on cooking on my Blackstone. I think I don't know if I told you this, Eric. It's when it did get cold here, finally, I just rolled it into my workshop and I fire up a propane heater and I'm just cooking in the workshop now. So
I'm really jealous of that.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see somebody said here, Blackstone's the best. If you like going to Mongolian grills, you can do that on the Blackstone for sure. I feel like I'm a hibachi chef at home. I'm not, but I feel like I am, and it's a lot of fun. I haven't perfected flipping shrimp into my wife's mouth yet, but I'm gonna work on that. And I need to learn the volcano too, right? Got to figure that out.
When I first got it going, the first thing I did was take both my spatulas and just clank them all around like I was fancy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think the second day, maybe it was the first day. This was the first day we got it. We made breakfast on it for like lunch or something like that. And I definitely tried to flip an egg up and land it on the side too. Did not play. It's cleaning a lot of shell off the griddle. But you got to be fancy. You got to try. You got to pretend.
Yeah. Practice makes perfect. You'll get there, man.
Well, I don't know that I should keep practicing this.
You shouldn't, because then maybe you'll get totally inspired and be like, you know what? New career path for me. I'm a hibachi chef, and you're out of here, and then I'll be really sad. So we can't let that happen.
Yeah.
Excuse me. All right, cool. You guys ready to rock and roll or roll? All right, let's dig in. So a lot has happened since we were able to last join you here. It was so crazy. We were talking about this, but we did a session pretty much exactly a month ago. There was an article. We started to get some chatter about this the day of our last session regarding a Log4j vulnerability, which I'm sure everyone on here has heard about now. And it actually popped the last time we did the Hackle Box. So we didn't get to talk about it, even though it feels like that was ages ago now. So we did think we'd start things off today with kind of a quick wrap about that, a little bit of discussion around that vulnerability. It's funny, I remembered we were talking about this. I'd seen it that day. We were kind of prepped with our topics for the list already, and Eric wasn't able to join us. He was sick last month, but we kind of rolled through, and then not more than 2 hours after we get done with this a month ago, we start to understand the severity of this, and it was like, well, we're a little too late there. We did get a bunch of emails out regarding that to our customer base, so hopefully you guys were able to get those. We tried to keep our blog updated with information as we were able to receive that and share it with you so you could be protected. But let's back on up to the vulnerability and what the vulnerability was. So essentially there was a vulnerability in the Log4j module that allowed an attacker to execute code as a parent process. It's extremely high level. So from what I understand, Log4j does support a default logging feature that's like message lookup substitution. That lookup method for JNDI, when paired with another protocol such as LDAP, RMI, or DNS, can be abused to essentially fetch a Java class from a remote source and then deserialize that and execute remote code on the local server. So in the beginning, that's what we were seeing was a lot of mass scanning, right? Where people were looking for vulnerable systems. And if you had Log4j running, you were likely vulnerable. And then at that point, we did see mass exploitation, and mass exploitation at this time was mostly dropping shells, right? I think we did see one instance where they did try to, after they dropped the shell, pivot to another device. But when I looked at this and what we were seeing over the course of the last few weeks, it was very reminiscent of the things that we observed for proxy logon and proxy shell as well. So for me, I think that at this point, we'll get into the details a little bit more, that this is something we're going to be dealing with for a long time. My fear is the same fear that we had when the proxy logon stuff happened, is that there were going to be a lot of people who were compromised, who were unaware of being compromised, and the pool of resources that were compromisable in this case is so large, it's not really logical to expect that the attackers could go to those secondary and tertiary attack exploitations in such a short amount of time. So I fear that in due time, our attackers are going to circle back around to those folks who are unknowingly vulnerable and unknowingly compromised, and then further exploit. So kind of pause there and shut up and let you guys talk about it a little bit. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's definitely the fear here, and you're right. So we saw a lot of like initial exploit, but not a lot of sort of post-exploit activity with these. Maybe a little bit of poking, a little enumeration, that kind of thing, but not a whole lot there. But yeah, that's you know, kind of the land grab thing, right? Go out, get as much as you can, come back later. And I think could be wrong. I think it was something like 3 billion vulnerable devices or something like that. It was a huge number. So you're dead on with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least going back, like you said, it's kind of similar to what you were seeing with like proxy logon shells and stuff like that being dropped. You you were seeing a lot back then. There were so many vulnerable, exchange servers back then and stuff like that. You saw a lot of stuff get dropped. People would patch, but those shells would still be around and stuff like that. And it was still a concern. People still had to threat hunt to some extent, even after the patching, to kind of make up for it and then make sure they weren't already compromised and missed.
I know, and this one too, let's talk about the exploitation a little bit. It was trivial, right? That was the thing that was also so scary about this. Not only was it so widespread, there was such a big resource pool that was vulnerable to this, but then secondary to that, to exploit was, it was trivial. I think that's the best word for it. The two paths that we observed the most were either just replacing the header and your request to that vulnerable server with your exploit code. And the other path was, if you had an input available in that application, you could essentially drop your exploit in that input and, deploy your payload at that point, which is scary in its own. But I think of that also is likely the reason we've seen such mass exploitation is because it was very scriptable, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, it's something that, at least on the web application pen testing side, that we say a lot is, and we try to drive it home to whether it be on a web app pen test with the result that we found, or whether it be in training that we've done with people like developers of web applications and stuff, right? Is that you'd never want to trust input that comes from the user potentially, right? Or from a client, basically, right? From a browser or the user or whatever. And you definitely don't ever want to take that input and just feed it into something, right? And in this case, that's kind of what's happening, right? It's that the input from a user is being sent to the logger, and then you have a situation like that. We see similar, like in a similar vein, other types of exploits that have been around forever. You could look at things like format string exploits and stuff, and like the printf functions if you're a developer, if anybody has development experience. One of the things we know about that now is, hey, if you just forward someone's input into it and you don't give it a format string or something like that, or format it yourself or whatever, if you send it just right into something that will accept forward or formatting, then you can send in things like lookups or like whatever, like we have in this case, So I think it's a lesson we already have been talking about and already should have learned, but it's just difficult to really take into consideration all the different places those things might exist,
Yeah, and in this case too, right? It's kind of one of those things that we tell people to do, right? Log as much as you can, log all these requests coming in, things like that. And like Oscar mentioned there, being able to just change your user agent in a browser, with a curl request or something like that, right? And that exploit, right? If you're logging those web hits, those 200s, if you want to get into that term for it. If you're logging those web hits off to a vulnerable system, then bam, you were in trouble there, and that's kind of sucks because we want people to log as much as we can, but in this case, it was a little bit of a problem. So.
Yeah, I mean, the default general logging setup is to log 2 pieces of information that are user controllable, right? The URL request and then the user agent. And it's been right in front of us for a long time. You know what I mean? Like everybody who looks at those logs knows that comes from something that's user controlled. But, like I said, it's hard to think about it from that perspective sometimes and realize that there might be a flaw somewhere in there and then dig into it. So.
Yep. Yeah, I think that does lead to the next piece I want to talk about very well. And we talk about, like, you've known this for years, the best practice and what we should and shouldn't do. It's kind of been in front of our face. But the other thing that made this one so challenging is it was embedded into so many products. And we've seen that in the beginning, there was confusion. We were talking about this too. I personally didn't realize that Log4j was integrated into so many COTS products, so many things that were just off the shelf. And it was really interesting as this played out too. I mean, it was like, watching a sports ticker roll as we continued to see more and more and more products that were affected by this because they had Log4j embedded into that product. I mean, like IBM WebSphere, LastPass, Logarithm, Momcast, Minecraft, obviously, that was kind of the big one. We heard about first, Okta, Oracle, Sophos, TeamViewer, VMware, NetApp, on and on and on and on and on and on. I mean, the list is huge. We have a partial list on our blog, but we do link to another tracker where there's a researcher who's actually tracked every product that was confirmed as affected by this. And the list is just mind-blowing. And so for me, I think that leads to another problem within the industry that maybe this could be the driving force for making a change, is that it's not always easy to understand the dependencies that are bundled with your off-the-shelf products. And we've seen that for a lot of folks who had these affected products, but there was no quick and easy way for them to determine if Log4j was actually a dependency or bundled into that product.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on top of that too, right? I mean, we kept seeing, I think it took 3 total patches before they got it, right? So each of those vendors that you're dealing with, each of those products where it's bundled in, had to issue a new patch as each of those came out to kind of keep up to date. But yeah, I think that's a really important point, is to just know what's there as best you can.
Mm-hmm.
Real fast.
Yeah, I think so.
Continue. We have a question about someone asking if we can enable live transcripts or closed captions. Is that an option that you can do, Oscar?
Yeah, I think we were asked that last time, and no, we can't do that. However, this will go on YouTube, and at that point you can enable that functionality. We'll work with our marketing team. We've actually spoke with them about that to see if it's possible to enable in future sessions, but as of today, I apologize, we're still not able to do that. Yeah, so kind of like back to what we were saying there too, and those, I think you had mentioned there were multiple patches. I do want to share some information just to make sure we clear this up. There is another CVE that's out there related to Log4j that came out at the end of last year, 2021 44832. I think a lot of folks seen that and said, oh no, here we go again, and we're gonna have to patch and go through the whole process again. But from my understanding, that latest vulnerability is a little bit different. To exploit that, you have to have access to write to the local config file to actually exploit that vulnerability. So my thoughts on that are, if sure you need to patch that, you need to track that and fix it, but the severity is not quite as high as what we've seen with the previous Log4j vulnerabilities. If an attacker has the access to modify your configuration file on that server anyway, you may have bigger issues at this point. Yeah, so we've put out tons of stuff on that. I don't know if anybody has any questions on how to resolve. I mean, really, it's patch, come up to the latest version of Log4j. Also, if you were vulnerable, like we've talked about in previous incidents with proxy logon, it's critically important to investigate. Don't patch and think you're fixed. Eric alluded to that earlier. The real issue here is that if you were vulnerable and you were exploited, the shell or the backdoor could still exist on your system. And so it's critically important to properly investigate that system for indicators of compromise. And then if you find those indicators of compromise, action appropriately or work with someone who can help you remediate those things.
Yeah, I would say too, just, I mean, I know we mentioned that it was trivial to exploit, but I mean, I think it may be important to understand how trivial it was to exploit, right? I mean, with one line, you could essentially hit a device, tell it to download a command and control beacon, something like that, and execute that. And if it was a Linux server, you could change the, chmod over to make it executable all in one line. And so we did see stuff like that. So keep that in mind, right? If you were vulnerable, there's a high likelihood that there was some level of exploit there on your system. So,
yep, I would agree. And I think we've shared a lot of information too on our blog about the IOCs and how to hunt there. So check those out. If you need assistance, always we're here. If not, give it a go. See if you're compromised. And yeah, if you are compromised, I mean, in this situation where if you identify that there was a shell dropped, they deployed remote access to your system. Typically, we do recommend to just rebuild that system, kind of start it all over. Save a copy though of the system that was compromised and had the shell dropped for forensic evidence, so we can do a full investigation. But for the short term, how do I get back online if I have been compromised? You want to go through that step of rebuilding the system essentially from scratch. And the bigger worry you would have at this point, if you identify that you have been compromised, there was remote access capabilities on the target web server, would be lateral movement throughout your network. So if you get to that point and you identify, hey, I was compromised, I didn't realize that. It's been a few weeks. Remote access was there. You probably want to do some lateral hunting throughout your network to make sure that the attackers weren't able to utilize that shell to move to other assets within your infrastructure. I've also mentioned this a lot too. Huntress has a really cool tool to check for your vulnerability. We shared this in all our blogs and emails. Check that out. It's very useful. We also shared some tips on how to use that tool as well. So hopefully that'll be beneficial to everyone here. Cool. Anything else you guys want to add on that one?
No, other than it feels like it was 2 months ago that it happened. So.
Yeah, so question for everybody in our audience, if you feel like chiming in, how many of you had your holidays ruined because of this? Hopefully no one, but I bet there's a few. All right, cool. So next topic, the Joint Cybersecurity Advisory, authored by the FBI, NSA, and CISA, issued an advisory on Russian cyber threat to U.S. critical infrastructure. We'll share this link with you, but we wanted to talk through this today because it's a lot of the things we've been talking about. So maybe we just unpack it there, and yeah, kind of piece through this. I'll start with the first primary points they make in this advisory is organizations should do these things: patch all your systems, prioritize patches with known exploits. Okay, great. We talked about that. Implement multi-factor authentication. We've talked about that a whole lot. Use antivirus software. Develop internal contact lists and surge support. Pretty much figure out what you're going to do when you have an incident. And so I've seen this, and I think Pinky, you said, like, when we're reading that article, it's like, this feels like something that we would have authored. And so I thought it'd be good just to chew on it today for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, that was exactly right. That was kind of my take on it. I mean, they even mentioned some things in there like Hawk and Sparrow for O365. Those are tools that a lot of people don't know about that are really, really helpful if you've got an O365 environment to kind of dig through things like that. And yeah, like you said, it mentions a lot of the things we've talked about over the last couple months. I was really pleased with this, right? I mean, I don't, a lot of these notices can be lacking, to be truthful there, but this one was really great. They did a really good job here.
Eric, I think you got muted.
I was gonna say, like you said, it's stuff that we've talked about a lot. It's a lot of the stuff that kind of, we talk about off this too, you know what I mean? That, you know, when I'm asking you guys, hey, what kind of incidents are you seeing lately? What is a lot of going on? Unless there's something that's going on, act like a big thing right now, like Log4j, right? Other than that, what are you seeing later on in the year? Well, we're still seeing people getting affected by old stuff, right?
Mhm.
And I thought that was interesting going through this thing and just seeing the list of the you know, things that the APTs were using. It's just like, you know, CVEs dating back to 2018, 2019, right? Like they're a couple years back now, and that's still what's heavily being targeted by people, right? By attackers. And it totally just completely mirrors, like I said, when I'm talking to your guys' team on the incident response side, just going, hey, what are you guys up to these days? What kind of stuff are you dealing with? It's always, I mean, it's often that kind of stuff. So
I will say too, one really good thing that they dropped in there that I thought was awesome, that we don't see a whole lot, is they mentioned that, you know, these actors are using virtual private servers, or really VPNs would work there as well, to get an IP address in the host country, right? So if they're attacking a US based asset, they get a US based VPN or something like that to launch from. And I think a lot of people don't think about that, because it's, you know, almost everybody's doing some type of geo blocking at this point. The effectiveness of that is debatable, but it's better than nothing, right? And you know, if we're reviewing logs in an incident, we immediately go for foreign IPs, right? We're going to hit low hanging fruit. So if you don't go any farther than that, you may miss some of that. So I thought that was really cool of them to call that out in here, because I don't think a lot of people think about that aspect of it.
yeah, I can say as an attacker, that's something we do think about sometimes, like especially if there's, you know, credentials that are compromised to get into a Outlook, Exchange, whatever situation, or O365 or whatever. Just like, hey, I don't want to get detected by impossible travel. So where is this place located, and what does it do? What makes sense to try to get access to it? You know, things like that.
It does make hunting for anomalies a little more challenging for sure. You know, I will say though, we've seen this in other cases too, right, Pink, where even though the attacker may be utilizing a system in the same region or even the same state, we've seen that before. If you're diligent and you are regularly reviewing those logs and logging activity, you can still find that. It's not going to trigger those impossible travel alerts like we're all used to. It's not going to fire on foreign IPs. But if you are diligent, you have a good review process for your logons, your critical logons, it is still possible to see those anomalies. And so I think we talk about that a lot for investigative purposes. Identifying the anomaly is the most important thing. Know the null and then hunt evil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the other piece, I think my internet's getting a little dodgy over here, guys. So if I drop, you got to run. Yeah.
All right.
Is maybe explain to folks how easy it is to stand up infrastructure. You know, if we had a target, let's just say it was in Boston, Massachusetts, how easy is it to mimic that and stand up infrastructure to target that victim?
I mean, you know, with so many different cloud services and stuff that are out there these days, being able to stand up infrastructure that you can control, you can secure yourself, and then use to kind of attack from is obviously very easy, right? I mean, that's why a lot of people are moving to cloud providers in general, right? Because sometimes, most of the time, it's a lot easier to stand up new infrastructure or things like that very quickly, right? So then it's just a matter of trying to get the right exit IP, right? If we can get something that's already hosted in that area or close enough to that area, it's not going to cause an issue, then work with that. Otherwise, you know, there's different options for potentially VPNs or working in different situations after that, I think too. So, you know, we don't generally, at least as us as attackers, we're not trying to get something that's right in your hometown or something like that, you know, in the same city as the headquarters, something like that, and try to go that crazy. But you definitely want to have something that doesn't trigger impossible travel, and that's pretty easy to pull off these days with cloud services and stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree. So cool. Yeah, I think you already touched on this, Eric, but I would like to talk about that vulnerability list again. I think we haven't talked about all of these, but a lot of these we've talked about before, right? That FortiGate VPN. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this is still on list. This is still being targeted. And I was doing some research on this at the end of last year, and the number of systems that are still available that are vulnerable to this absolutely blows my mind. There's still a high volume of these out there. If you guys aren't familiar, what we're talking about, CVE 2018, that's right, from 4 years ago now. 13379, which is a vulnerability that affected FortiGate VPNs, where essentially it was another trivial exploit to enumerate a vulnerable device. You can pull user usernames, passwords, and on top of that, see who's actually logged in. And then you can see the group memberships for those. So you know what role and what group you're going to have when you get the login. Yeah, fix that. And I understand too from a lot of folks who I have talked to in the past that are still vulnerable from this. Typically, it's because they're paying an MSP or an ISP to manage that device for them. They don't have access to the device. They don't manage that device, and that ISP or the MSP is not being diligent on their updates around that. So again, it goes back to what we always say: know what you have, be aware of what you have, and if you have an ISP who's refusing to fix this, put some pressure on them or shut down your VPN. Don't use your VPN until it's fixed.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. For me, like firewalls were always doing IT. Firewalls were always a problem to patch. Right? Nobody wants a downtime. Nobody wants to shut things down, and you don't know what it's going to break. So I get that a little bit, but at this point, we're 4 years out. It's probably time to get it done. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of that stems from the old school Cisco days. I'm sure you remember some of this, Pink, where maybe you push an OS update to your Cisco device, and guess what? They change half the syntax for your code sets. Oh, guess what? Too, back in those old days, Cisco wouldn't check to make sure you had enough disk space, and you could essentially DOS your own device by trying to update that device. And so I think there's a lot of residuals from that in today's world, where people are kind of afraid to update these devices because they don't really understand them. I know a lot of SMBs probably don't have the need for a network engineer or network specialist, and so this is something they stand up, they plug it in, they play it, they pay someone to configure it the first time, or maybe they get through it in a very challenging process, and then it's working, and then we just leave it alone because we don't want to impact business. But I think it is critical that you guys understand why patching those network infrastructure devices are just as important as anything else, especially if it has a public footprint. If you look through the list, and we'll share this with you, there's like the Cisco routers on there, FortiGate VPNs is on there, the F5 big IP is on there. There's a lot of network devices that fit that bill. Probably why there's still so many of those vulnerable and being targeted by these APTs.
Yeah. Yeah, and that old school Cisco is exactly right. I see a comment from somebody I used to work with here, Troy, who noted that people waiting on hardware refreshes to make it go away. And that's exactly right. I mean, that's exactly the type of thing we used to see. So dead on there.
Yeah, I would completely agree. So yeah, we'll share this advisory with everyone. I would urge you to read it. There's a lot of good information in there. Can briefly talk about some of the other things that they call out, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who's been tuning in for a while. One is kind of going back to, I think you had touched on this, Pink, but another point regarding that was they specifically call out that the actors have demonstrated the ability to maintain persistent, undetected, long-term access in compromised environments by using legitimate credentials. And I think, one piece of that, right, is by not triggering that impossible travel. But the other piece that tells me that, and we've seen this a lot, that folks aren't really diligent. They don't have a process in place to continuously audit those logon capabilities, their VPN environments, their Citrix environments, all those types of things. I don't think they are monitored to the level they should. And I'm not saying that's for everybody, but just a generality in our landscape today.
So are you saying maybe that credential sets haven't been refreshed and things like that? And maybe they got some advice from a very large software vendor to not change passwords?
That could affect it too. Yeah. Yeah, I know we've seen cases like that too. We've had multiple ransom cases, right, where we come in and folks are just, we have no idea how they could have gotten in. And then we spend an hour in their VPN device and say, well, they've been logging into your VPN for 4 months. That's how they got here. So yeah, change those passwords, but also have a process to monitor those logins for anything that gives an access point into your internal infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, another piece of advice that I'd say too about like VPNs, at least, and stuff like that, is like take into consideration what people need to access over VPN and maybe segment some things out to limit exposure. Oftentimes, if we get in on an external penetration test, when we get in, we find it's just like, well, once you're on the VPN, you have access to the entire corporate network,
Yeah.
And so, the bigger the surface area is to attack, the more likely you're going to find some way of continuing to spread, continuing to get, escalate privileges, grab credentials, do whatever, like get around and do something. So yeah, I mean, I think oftentimes when I have that conversation with people, it kind of hasn't really fully occurred to them to actually think that through and think about, hey, what can you access from the VPN and what do you need to access from the VPN? Because a lot of times when you have people working remotely, there's only a select amount of things they need to access. And those things are still going to be vulnerable in that situation, but at least it's a smaller surface area.
Yeah, I see that. Sorry, go ahead, Pink.
Oh, I was just going to say, and something I know, like, Eric and I have talked about before too, right? I mean, things like Surface accounts, right? Those things never get their passwords reset. It's a difficult process when you do a lot of times. And so talk about like that right there. You get dropped on the corporate network and you compromise a backup account that's backing up 50 machines or something like that, right? Those credentials are cached in places and things like that. So, another reason to segment that, like you're saying.
Yeah, and we see that a lot. Like I've seen that a lot for, I feel like my whole career, where like, just like Eric said, the VPN is just the VPN. You get on the VPN and you got it. And I don't understand why that's still so prevalent today. I think it's well known that should not be the case, but it continues to be the case. And so, maybe we have to go back to like we were talking about before. Why don't people update these devices? Maybe it's because they don't understand how to update those devices and it's a little overwhelming to them. And so like in that case, we talk about, hey, if you don't know how to like do information security, and information security is not the same as tech, right? Think about your tech buckets the same way. Tech is not just tech. If you don't have the skill sets today to properly manage your network devices, to properly build those VPN configurations, like find a partner who will help you, or work to level up your staff so they have those skills and they are comfortable doing those tasks.
Yeah, and I'd say one of the reasons for higher prevalence these days too is, I mean, obviously everybody stood up a bunch of remote solutions to handle the COVID pandemic, right? And hey, I was a sysadmin in the past, so have you guys been, you know what I mean? Like taking shortcuts or doing something not perfectly to get it up fast and to respond to an issue is something that people do. And but now's the time to go back, if you haven't already, right? Like go back and go, okay, we stood this up really quick. Did we actually do it right? It's never too late to at least think about it, even if it maybe wasn't done right in the first place. It's a good time to look at it.
Yeah,
definitely.
Anthony here in chat said, so along the lines of they have dual or MFA solutions, so they're safe, right? I've heard that many times, but however, is MFA everywhere? No, should monitor those. And I, even to that point, was working with a client a couple years back, and they had implemented MFA, some kind of MFA solution on jump stations to go into their CDE actually. And we're completely surprised when we made it into their CDE because they didn't realize that their MFA wasn't actually like it was only if you were actually logging into the system or remote desktoping into the system. But if you actually just did something like a PS exec to that system, it would just go ahead and let you do your thing. It didn't require any second factor, right? And so making sure not only that it's everywhere, but that it actually is covering every part of the interface, all the interfaces, right? And every type of way of authenticating to something.
Yeah, I mean, you think about something like the Log4j, right? That would bypass any and all MFA. There's nothing that I would see that would have an MFA on it that would be, that would impact that there. I mean, that I could come up with immediately. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we see that a lot too. I mean, in casework, we talk to folks. Yeah, we got MFA everywhere, and then we start our analysis and identify it was either misconfigured, and there were some users that didn't take part of that, or just like Eric mentioned, maybe there were other services available that they were unaware of that MFA wasn't required on. And
yeah, well, and make sure
attackers are persistent.
I was going to say, make sure user exclusions aren't in play. So just a recent story, I was doing a penetration test last month, and we compromised through an Exchange server. We were able to get passwords for 6 accounts, right? They didn't have MFA on their Exchange. So that was unfortunate. We were able to get into that. But looking into accessing the VPN, we're able to see that they had a really good setup. really good setup for configuration of it, how long certain like keys and stuff like that would last, and all the stuff. And I was like, man, we're not going to get in. We're not going to be able to beat this. But just in case, let me try using all the credentials I have on their VPN. Well, one of the users was excluded apparently from requiring the MFA, so we were able to get in.
Yep.
One of the 6. So yeah.
Was he maybe an executive who was an older gentleman who said, no, I'm not doing that?
No, actually, in this case, it was not. I from my research alone, I couldn't tell you why this person had an exclusion from that, but maybe they were just a problem child who couldn't get it fixed or get it working right. I don't know, you know, but I just know that it happened, you know, and so it's important to make sure that not only do you roll it out on its place, but roll it out to everyone, and regardless of their complaints or their issues,
and enforce it, right? So I mean, I know we've seen a couple too where it's rolled out to everyone, but it's optional, or maybe they didn't realize that it's optional, but that happens a fair bit too.
Yeah, and not like I've said these people's name, and I'm not gonna, but I will say, just in case, I mean, like, they honestly had a great setup for that part of it. Like, they had done a great job, and I could, going through the emails, that's one of the misses. The multi-factor wasn't on the email, right? But going through the emails, I could see them troubleshooting with people, and I could read exactly how everything was configured and all that stuff, right? And I literally thought we were beat as far as getting any further at that point. So, but it's just one little miss can cause an issue.
That's a good point too, right? I mean, I know like we're all three pretty careful about this because, again, like you said, we've been sysadmins in the past. We know how complex things can get, and it's easy to miss something, right? So it's not that any kind of blaming on folks like, oh, you should have do better, right? Nothing like that. It happens, like you're saying. There's a really well set up environment and one miss, right? Sometimes it's all it takes, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think that's something we should make clear, is like, we never victim blame for this situation, right? We're all human. We all make error. That's just the fact of life. It's more important, while all these things we talk about are important, it is more important to understand, hey, how do I recover from this? Having a process in place so when it does happen to you, you're able to recover. And even more importantly, that you go into that situation with an open mind, looking to learn and better improve your security posture. Sometimes we have challenges, like when we go in, where people feel like we're just trying to poke at them or single them out for doing something wrong. That's never the case. We're really just trying to identify the root cause, and we identify that root cause working together with you to say, how do we stop this from happening again? But why I say it's still most important to know how to respond and be prepared is because of things just like Log4j, right? We can do all these things. We can have a great security posture and do everything by the books, but that's still not going to help us when that next O-Day pops and the attackers have the ability to, drop a remote shell and get in your environment. Now, when they get in there, having good security posture is likely going to delay or prevent them from hitting those secondary and tertiary exploits and ransoming your environment. So it buys us time. So that's why, it's a little bit of everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, too. So before we move on to our next topic, I just wanted to quickly call out the article does reference again, they're targeting operational technology as well as ICS, industrial control systems. I think SCADA, PLCs, which we've talked about here in the past. Again, we do have some articles about this as well, but just kind of want to hammer home that fact of that's why it's important to make sure you're properly segmenting that infrastructure and testing that segmentation, like going through, like hiring dudes like Eric to come in and say, hey, can I get to your ICS? That's the most important thing. Critical infrastructure being targeted, no new surprise here: defense, health, energy, telco, and government. So yeah, give this article a read. There's a lot of best practices in here that are really good. Check this vulnerability list and just make sure that you're not vulnerable to any of these, because you are likely being targeted right now. Read through this, use it as a best practice guide. I put the Minxie seal of approval on it. I think it's a good article, and I think you should all give it a read. Anything else you guys want to chat about that one for Boogie?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered it.
All right. Cryptominers and your antivirus. Oh boy.
I'm gonna be rich.
Rich.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say I read this week and my jaw kind of dropped. It was totally surprised and in disbelief and a little dumbfounded. Still am, honestly, when I think about it. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it's irresponsible. I think
I do too.
it reminds me of a shaven fraction of a penny off of all bank transactions. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Take a penny, leave a penny, man. Come on.
Let me start. I should have told everybody, in case you're not aware, a couple news stories came out this week. Like Norton 360 now comes with a crypto miner. Avira antivirus comes with a crypto miner. They're just built in. And from what I'm understanding too, like I think it's enabled by default if you have the system requirements.
It says
do you
that
have to turn it on?
It's an opt-in, is what it's saying.
Okay,
It's an opt-in, and I didn't see anything saying that it wasn't. But I did see some complaints from people saying it was difficult to remove and stuff like that. But it does appear to be opt-in and only opt-inable if you have the system requirements to pull it off.
Yeah, you got to have an NVIDIA. I need 8 gigs of RAM and start raking in that crypto money, boys.
Yeah. I mean, my personal thing about it is, like, I talk about this in general. We've had all kinds of debates, people out in the world just talking about video cards. We'll take a step away from this for a second, right? Like people say, oh, video cards, if anybody shops for a video card or knows anything about it or has tried to get their kid a video card for the computer, whatever the situation is, you'll know that there's a massive shortage of them, right? It's very difficult to get them. They're getting scalped or picked up by manufacturers, PC builders and stuff like that. They're very difficult to get it as a normal person. And I've seen so many people refer to it as, well, it's all the crypto miners stealing them up, right? And if you actually do the math on that, you're not going to make hardly any money doing something like that, right? Like stealing up video cards and doing that. So the idea, then you take that like knowledge of how the math works out and how much money someone actually would make mining with their video card in this day and age with the current way things are with mining, and you apply it to these people who are just want to have their AV, man. You know what I mean? Like their setups. There's not that much money to be made from that single random system that has just enough requirements to pull this off, especially after you take into consideration things like electricity costs, right? And then on top of that, when you take a look at like different the fees and fines and stuff like that for transferring that and trying to actually cash it out and all this other stuff, but the fractions of it that the antivirus provider, right, can get their hands on will add up tremendously potentially for them. So for any individual who's actually goes off the hype of, man, I heard Bitcoin's worth 40,000 right now or something like that, right? They think this is a great idea. Maybe they're actually going to get nothing out of this, probably, or very little, like a couple dollars, right? And the antivirus makes a ton.
Yeah, maybe a couple dollars, right? I don't know. We were talking about this. Like, there's a 15% rake I've seen, which is way higher than most of the pool rakes. And then on top of that, like you said, like the energy cost of what you're going to get from your one little crappy NVIDIA on your laptop are probably going to outweigh what your return in crypto is.
Yeah, and I don't know how hard these miners are running, right? I've done a little bit of this in the past, right? There's some CPU mining you can do. I don't think that's the case with these though. They're actually doing the GPU ones.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of wear and tear on your GPU. I mean, I burned out a card doing just this and made nothing off of it, right? I mean, I paid more for the card than I ever got out of it, not counting the electricity. And I'm, like Oscar said, I'm in the TVA area. Electricity is cheap here, and even still, like it's so minimal. I mean, aside from the financial side of this, as an IR guy, this frustrates me a little bit because we already find a lot of crypto miners in incidents, right? It's a pretty common thing for somebody to get compromised and they drop a crypto miner in there. Sure, why not? It's your electricity, not mine. Makes sense, right? We've seen a lot of it. But now, and also too, we spent a lot of time filtering the noise caused by AV engines, right? Because antivirus, by all means, kind of looks like malware when you're looking at it like in a memory dump or something like that. It's kind of how it behaves. And so now, not only are we going to have to weed out the noise from that, we're probably going to have to weed out all these alerts for crypto mining activity and things like that, and try to oh no, this is just your legitimate Norton 360. Sorry, I don't know. It's more for us to get through to try to find what's going on.
I just think it's really funny that people pay for these tools to stop malicious crypto miners from getting on their system. And then they're like, well, but we're also just going to put a crypto miner on. No big deal. The other thought, I'm sorry, go ahead, Eric.
I was going to say, you got three major issues if you want to get out there and start doing crypto mining, right? At least I think three. You got the cost of the electricity, right? You've got the degradation of the hardware and the cost of the hardware and replacing it, right? And then you've got the scalability of it to make enough money. If you just deploy it to everyone else and let them replace their video cards, then pay for the electricity and then run it for you, you just accomplished all three of them. You're good to go.
That's a great model on their part. Yeah, I mean, hats off to them for monetizing their customer base. But my goodness, come on.
I'm so like, to us, it seems obvious. That's their goal, right? They're going to profit off their customer base, getting free resources. Boom, no brainer. And on top of that, like their customers are paying for their product too, so it's like double profit. But then I look at this, and I know you guys have seen lately, like the global communications about how some countries are beginning to outlaw coin mining. Because the significant impact on energy consumption. I know there's been a handful of countries that have banned that. And then you got Norton over here going, yeah, who cares? Everybody have a crypto miner. I'm going to make some money before they shut it down.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're just like, hey, the difficulty will go down since those people aren't in it anymore. We'll rake it in.
I mean, actually, that's a valid point. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but good point, Eric. Yeah. It's I don't know. It's kind of a mess. And I mean, I guess, you know, if you rake in a few coins of whatever they're mining with this, I'm not sure which one they're actually doing. If it's Bitcoin, you're going to get nothing.
It's Ethereum.
The difficult is it Ethereum? Okay,
it's
Ethereum,
it's
still pretty difficult. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you sit on it for a while, you know, maybe you'll make some money. But by that time,
not enough to replace the hardware that probably burned out as you sat it online and used it the whole time.
Yeah.
Well, they do set your wallet up for you, just so you know.
Yeah, and they store the key for it in the cloud.
And they store the key for you too. Yeah, in the cloud. So.
I do see we got a thing here about replacing advertisements on websites, so small Java-based like crypto miners or whatever. I have seen some things on that in the past. I mean, it is what it is. It's kind of a nice way to get somebody paid for their website. You know, pick up a couple things here and there. I don't hate that one because I don't think that's going to be as difficult. That's most likely going to be CPU mining, which isn't as hard on systems, but also, you know, it's not as effective either. So I don't know. I think it's kind of a neat concept of ways to pay and get rid of advertisements. I'm pretty cool with that. So we're not. I mean,
it's neat. I look at it as something that just wouldn't work. I mean, it wouldn't pay as much. I don't think. You know what I mean?
Probably
unless
not,
you just happen to have a site that you know people just sit on, right? Like if you got a stock ticker site that's just people are just sitting there watching it or something like that. Otherwise, I feel like it's just one of those things that when you take the fact that it's CPU mining, which is just infinitely small comparative to what's going on out there these days, right? And then you take into consideration there's going to be kind of a layer of abstraction through using JavaScript to do the whole thing, so it won't be as efficient and all that stuff. I mean, I think realistically, the only person, I mean, you might make some money if you can get a bunch of people to do it, and we've seen that people plant them as maliciously, right? But like realistically, if you're trying to replace ad revenue, you're probably not going to do a very good job with it. That'd be my guess.
The one exception, I agree completely with that. The one exception, and the Kentucky folks will get this, is KSR. They could probably be all right.
Yeah.
It's a Kentucky sports
refresh.
I think people live on it, man.
Well, you don't want people hitting refresh though, otherwise it'll stop everything.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah,
that is a good point. Yeah. All right, let's boogie. We only got a few minutes left, and we want to get to the fishing report before we go. But first, Patch Tuesday was a doozy. Just want to give a little PSA here out for everybody. 96 patches were released. 9 were critical. We dug in a little bit on these. There's so much to digest right now. This came out the 11th. And then on top of the 9 that are critical, there are 2 that actually have public exploit code available. They're not rated as critical. They're rated as important. So yeah, check that out. I know one of those 2 is publicly exploitable. So there is CVE 2022-21907. That's the HTTP protocol stack remote code execution vulnerability. Publicly exploitable and wormable. Eric's favorite word. I think Eric was telling me it's a bug in the HTTP trailer support. I don't know if you want to share that with anyone else.
Well, I don't think that one, you said talking about 21907. Is that the one you're talking about?
21907. Yeah.
I don't think that one had actual public code available yet, right?
No. It's publicly exploitable.
Oh, yeah. It can be exploited remotely, and we didn't dig into it too much, but it is using. It looks like, just from my little bit of digging into it, it's using trailer header support and stuff like that for chunked encoding trailer headers. Not going to dive into it, but it looks like the solution to it is that, if it's supported and it's turned on, it needs to be turned off. It's a registry key thing. I'm curious to see if that one plays out into something bigger, or how affected, like how many systems are affected by it. We'll see, but definitely you're going to want a patch right now. There's a lot of stuff in here that's a lot of remote code execution, a lot of privilege escalation, a lot of stuff that's not rated critical that is still pretty critical, I'd say. But Microsoft kind of rates them a little differently. So there's definitely some 9.0 CVSS score things that are not, they're listed as important, that I would still be concerned about as well. So
yeah, to a part of the PSA, there is a new exchange, RCE. I seen that and was like, oh, here we go again. And the good news I'll say with this one is what Microsoft has told us is that it was internal, adjacent network only, and authentication is needed for exploit. I do believe the authentication level can be any authentication, doesn't have to be privileged, but at least it's not going to be on that public attack vector again, like we've seen with proxy logon. So patch, yeah,
Cool.
I mean,
just patch.
All right, fishing report. What you got, Pink Man?
Right. Yeah. So this is not so much on the fishing side of things. To be honest with you, I was kind of poking around the guys, see if anybody's seen anything cool new in the world of fishing. And no, it's still the same things are still working. So I think we've covered most of the basic ones at this point. When we get new ones, we'll definitely cover those too. But wanted to talk a little bit about a tool that we're seeing in some cases right now. Something you're probably not aware of. It's not used a ton. The tool is called ngrok, so it's NGROK if you're looking for it. And so what this is, it's essentially a legitimate tool, right? So it's not going to flag your antivirus or anything like that. And let's say I'm a programmer, I want to test a website that I'm working on my local machine, and I want to send it to my other programmer buddy on the other side of the country. But my system, my network admins don't allow port 80 inbound to my machine, right? Because they probably don't, and if they do, that's a problem for another day. But what this can do is you fire this up and you basically map port 80 on your machine to what is essentially a public DNS entry, right? A URL that your buddy can then go hit. And it goes through the ngrok, like I think it's ngrok.io servers, so it goes out to them and it makes that publicly available. Where this gets a little tricky is it's not just web, right? You can publish any port, any service. So in particular, the two that we're seeing, are remote desktop and VNC. So, remote access utilities that are almost certainly not allowed through your firewall. And if they are, again, problem for another day. But so what we saw, and we actually saw these primarily in the proxy shell attacks that we've been working, is that attackers were come in through proxy shell, do whatever they got to do. They get their initial shell and then drop this ngrok application and map it to remote desktop. So then there's essentially a publicly available remote desktop to your server, to your machine, wherever they dropped that. And think about that as it's a persistence mechanism, right? Let's say you patch the proxy shell and clean up all the shells. These guys still have another way back in. It's not overly loud. It's kind of going outbound on port 80 from what I saw. So not going to flag a whole lot of things. And so, maybe just do a search in some of your systems, especially if you've had some other compromise. Look around for this. It's generally not renamed or anything like that too. It's just ngrok.exe. There's like an ngrok.yml file as well. Huntress has a really nice article out about it as well. It's called Abusing Ngrok Hackers at the End of the Tunnel. I'm not sure if we'll get that out or not, but if you want to just go search for it, look for that. It's a lot less obvious C2 method than something like Cobalt Strike or something that everybody and everything is looking for. To be honest with you, it kind of surprised us to see it pop up. We hadn't seen it in any previous cases, and so now it's kind of on the list of things to check to see if it's out there. But neat method from the attackers, honestly. RDP back in pretty rowdy, right? Just RDP to the internet without you knowing about it.
I think this is a trend we're going to see more and more of. And we think about it. So now the ngrok thing, we've observed the Rebel Yell, which we published and talked about a couple months ago. And it's that trend of, just like you said, like these command and controls, we're getting better at identifying the tool sets are getting better. The average user is becoming more aware of those. So they're getting better at identifying those. And so we're going to see attackers pivot to utilizing legitimate tools as a command and control. And I think also we're probably going to see some new frameworks pop up. We have to eventually.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that this is the type of attack that it's been documented since the beginning of hacking. You know what I mean? Like to some extent, right? This is something that, I mean, not using ngrok specifically, but the type of thing that's is accomplishing. I mean, if you take an OSCP course or anything else, I mean, it always documents, hey, you might want to get a reverse, tunnel kind of back that you can port into something. We saw incident you guys were working on not that long ago that was using putty to establish remote ports and stuff like that, right? Kind of same thing. It's just a matter of like, well, what else can we use to do this same thing? Ngrok is used by attackers too. Like if you're someone who dabbles in like kind of how things are exploited and you're trying to messing with that pen testing type of stuff, ngrok can be used for the same situation. If you're ever trying to get a reverse shell back, but you don't want to open up a port in your stuff, that's how a lot of attackers had been using it. You go out there and you get a remote shell back into your machine, you accept it without opening up a port on your thing by using ngrok. Well, then someone was like, well, hey, what if we just throw it on their system and do the same thing? Sure enough. Because it's lightweight, it's portable.
My man Marty commented here, the importance of maintaining software inventory lists. I completely agree with that. Baseline, investigate anomalies. I think we say that a lot. So
yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right, my dudes, good session. Anything else you guys want to share before we wrap it up?
No, I don't think so. I think we're good.
I think you just sent me a message, maybe sent us a message.
Well, you said lightweight.
Yeah.
Anybody, anybody who's ever enjoyed strength sports, right? Knows why lightweight's funny. So
lightweight. It's lightweight and portable.
All right, it's Friday. Hope you guys all, our listeners, and you guys both have a good, relaxing weekend. And thanks for joining. As always, we'll talk to you guys next month. See ya.
Bye, everybody.